Greetings. Welcome to the spread, NESN.com's Football Picks Podcast. I'm NESN.com's Mike Cole, joined once again by my friends Ricky Doyle and Andre Khatchaturian, also of NESN.com fame. Gentlemen, how are we?
Doing great, Mike. How are you?
Not bad. Same old. It's another weird week. We are here to discuss NFL Week 5. We're already in Week 5. We'll make our against the spread picks for the 3 best games of the week, or that's a whole nother thing.
It's a relative term.
Yeah, we'll do some locks and upsets, then we will get out of here. Once again, we're in a weird spot this week with COVID wreaking havoc on the Tennessee Titans, something that we dealt with last week, and we'll go right back to that well this week. But before we do that, before we do anything, if you're watching on YouTube, head on over to iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Rate, subscribe, download, listen, re-listen, re-rate. I don't even know if that's possible. Leave a positive review. Tell us how great we are. Nothing else will be accepted. And help us build the brand, so to speak, and continue to enjoy our wonderful Football Picks podcast. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into the painful stuff. How did we do last week, Andre?
Ricky, very poor week. You went 4-11 last week.
You're coming a trend. I need it. Yeah. You know what I need is an early season buy here. Like, get out to an apple orchard or a pumpkin patch or something and take my mind off these picks.
That could be the remedy for you, Ricky. But Mike, you and I, we did all right. I went 9-5. Mike, you went 8-6, I believe. Did I count that right? Or,
I mean, you're the mathematician.
Yeah. No, sorry.
9-6. With the USC doctor.
8-7.
I was gonna say there's 15
count
games.
The last game.
So we're not. Yeah. Monday night screwed me again. I mean, fine. If this is usually where we lament our picks. I will take my loss on the Patriots game, but man, that was an unfortunate break for me in terms of having the Patriots plus the points there. Andre, you're in the same boat, I think.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and
that looks for at least
we all
for
came really
half.
close in that Falcons game. The Atlanta almost covered in the end, but
They had no business covering that game, though.
Could have been a good backdoor push.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, that's the way it goes. This is just it's a weird year. Let's get into Week 5. We'll continue the weird year. Let's just start here, guys. I guess.
Let's just hope we're not the kiss of death this week. Because
yeah.
It seemed like it didn't take very long for everything to unravel after we made our picks last week, because we had obviously the COVID news and then impacting 2 of the 3 games. So
I will say this though. Yeah, well, yeah, we had the Patriots game was by no fault of our own. That was just the Cam Newton stuff came from the clouds. But I will say this, like last week we came into this knowing that Titans, who are they playing? Our Titans Steelers game was going to be an issue, right? And we said that from the beginning, and not long after we got done, they basically postponed the game. We're going to start with the Titans again this week, and all of the momentum coming into this one is positive over the last few days. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was Diana Rossini, who has been tapped into this thing the entire time, reported this morning, we're doing this on Tuesday, that the test came back negative again. So the Titans are back to work beginning Wednesday. Short week for a real tough game. They have the 4-0 Buffalo Bills coming to town this week. Game's in Nashville. The spread is choose your own adventure, basically. We try to go with the consensus data for our lines every week, and it's subject to change because it's just we do this so early in the week. It's tough, whether it's injuries or now it's COVID. It's still not a given that this game gets played. It looks like it's trending in that way. That uncertainty obviously leads to an uncertainty surrounding the lines. You start looking around, and in some places it opened at 8.5 or 1 or something. Now it's down to 6.5, and some it's all over the place. So I guess for the sake of our argument here, let's just kind of handicap the game, say where we're leaning, and at what spread would you feel comfortable taking it. So Ricky, why don't you kick off this thought experiment for us?
That's certainly what it is a thought experiment. And so I guess my initial question that I would pose to the group is whether we feel that the week off, could that ultimately benefit the Titans? Because it's weird to say where a week off because of a deadly virus in which your facilities are completely off limits could potentially be beneficial. But, given the injury situation, I mean, you get back your you might get back if you're Tennessee, your top receiver, your
It
starting
sounds like they
tackle.
will. Yeah.
What's that?
It sounds like AJ Brown will play this week.
So this, this could potentially serve as that early season buy, the one that I could use so much, and maybe be a silver lining or a blessing in disguise to this Tennessee team. I hated the matchup last week going up against the Steelers. I like this matchup against the Bills much better. I mean, it's weird to say given how well Buffalo has played, but I think the Titans still do things well offensively. The early down success rate that they've had. The Bills have had some struggles covering tight ends. I think that could be a problem, especially if it sounds like Matt Milano might be out this week. So really the injury situation is trending in Tennessee's favor in working against Buffalo, which is coming off a trip to Vegas in really two hard-fought games in a row against the Dolphins and the Rams. So I think that the week off kind of comes at a good time. Maybe it benefits them. So I would, presumably I'm getting points in this. I don't know if it settles on that 8.5 line or whatever it is. I don't know if it's going to be that high. If it is, I love it. Give me the points. I'll take Tennessee. But I think just overall, I'm leaning towards the Titans in this game.
I do think it's interesting I just want to jump in here real quick. You're right. It is that is a debate to be had whether this week off helps them or not, because if it was a regular bye week, I think there's no question it helps them, with Brown and Taylor Lewan, and they've got injuries, especially on offense, but like they couldn't get into the building. Like that's
Well,
that's, you know what I mean?
It's a really tough thing to decipher.
Not to mention they've got a handful
from a strictly rest standpoint.
Yeah,
it's great, but for the reasons you're mentioning is you don't have access to much. So what do you what do you do?
Don't know, like
doing chin-ups in doorways or
like how many guys are like they had a handful of guys test positive too. Like that's are those guys gonna be ready to go? I don't know. Andre, what do you want?
I was gonna say I think if the Buffalo Bills in terms of their wins this year, they really haven't blown anyone out. So that spread is, if it's 8.5, I'm absolutely taking Tennessee.
I can't believe it's gonna be 8.5. I really
No, that's but and Tennessee. I think Buffalo does win the game. I just think they're a better all around team. Tennessee allows 6.5 yards per play, which is the second worst in the league. The third worst yards per play differential. Buffalo's 10th in that category. Titans also have the worst rush defense, 5.8 yards allowed per carry. Buffalo really hasn't ran the ball all that well this year, but I do think they win this game. But Tennessee, again, they haven't really blown anyone out. So Tennessee's going to, if it's 5 points, somewhere in that range, I'm going to take Tennessee. Anything less than that, I will take Buffalo.
Yeah, I guess it's a clean sweep then if we're all on. It seems like we're all leaning Tennessee, getting points. If I'm getting up to about a touchdown, I think I would feel. And honestly, I could probably be talked into like 3.5. I think, which is.
I think that's a good. I think 3.5 is a good number. Like I think that 3.5 and under, maybe I'd lean Buffalo, but other than that, I mean, but would it stun me if Tennessee won this outright?
No,
I don't think so. You know what I mean? Like this. I don't know that there's a huge discrepancy between these two teams at the end of the day. I mean, obviously, Buffalo is to this point been the better team, but like I don't know, these two teams will probably meet in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, like I know Buffalo's been really good, but I don't look at them as like on the same echelon as Kansas City or Green Bay. You know what I mean? At least not through the first 4 weeks. In Tennessee, yeah, it just feels like we're gonna get a really good idea of like how much a COVID debacle or COVID crisis is on the spread, right? Like, because I just can't imagine with this game being in Tennessee, and I know home field advantage isn't necessarily what it's been in the past, but like actually a Buffalo game in Tennessee might be an advantage for Buffalo the way teams travel to Nashville, but it's just, I think we're going to get a pretty good idea of like how odds makers feel about the lines and or how they feel about that week off or whatever.
You look at Buffalo's wins this year, it's not a great resume. You got the Jets, Dolphins, and the Raiders. I never really bought into the Raiders. I know everybody was in love with the Raiders on that Monday night win. Those are 3 games that they should have blown out their opponent, and the largest margin was that 27-17 Week 1 win over the Jets. That Rams win at home was obviously very impressive, but they ended up blowing a huge lead in that and barely held on. So this Titans game might be this road game against the Titans might be their biggest test of the year so far. So again, that spread is 8.5 points or anything close to that. I'm absolutely taking Tennessee, even though I do think Buffalo will win this game.
You got to think that Tennessee defense is better than it's shown for a majority of the season as well. I mean, and they're a team that +5 turnover differential.
Yeah.
So, this is as good as Josh Allen has been. I mean, it's still a relatively small sample size. Like there is a certain element of, him being prone to mistakes in this game, and maybe that sort of swings things in Tennessee's favor. It's just one of these things where these two teams, to me, feel pretty close. Buffalo having the slight edge, and so if you're gonna give me Titans at home with points, sure.
A couple quick points, Ricky. You mentioned the Matt Milano injury. They also Levi Wallace, the corner, is dinged up as well. He's actually had a really nice year according to Pro Football Focus. I think he's like the 19th ranked corner out of 111 ranked corners. So if he's not there, especially with A.J. Brown coming back, that's something to consider as well. I will point out, too, and I meant to mention this off the top, the home team thing has been kind of odd this year. Last week, home teams went 6-9 straight up, 4-10-1 against the spread. 28, 34 and 1 against the spread this year. The home teams are, and 500 straight up. Interestingly, they're actually doing better than they were last year. There was like a weird week 4 last year was wild where the home teams went 4-11 straight up. It eventually kind of course corrected, but it is going to be something to monitor as we move forward, how home field advantage plays into these games, whether or not it does at all. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. So, all right, let's talk about a game that actually has a line, actually has two teams that are fairly healthy, at least, according to when it comes to the pandemic that is ravishing the world. The Keystone matchup. I think this is a yearly preseason game, but they're going to play in the regular season this year. The Philadelphia Eagles head across the state to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. We get the Steelers currently sitting at 7-point favorites. The total sits at 45 right now. Philly coming off of a Sunday night win against the 49ers. Pretty impressive. Also, 1-2-1. The Eagles are now in first place, as are the Steelers, who are 3-0. Well, actually, Steelers. Are the Steelers in first? They're 3-0.
Undefeated.
That's the thing about this is now we're going to get into the percentage points are going to be a factor. We've already got we got the one tie out of the way, postponed games. Like this is going to be a real pain in the rear when we get to the later in the season.
But we all loved Pittsburgh last week going up against Tennessee. That game obviously postponed, as we mentioned earlier. Laying 7 here seems like a lot. Maybe not. Andre, what do you think?
I still like Pittsburgh. They truly had a bye week, unlike Tennessee, who God knows how their players are doing with the virus. Pittsburgh, this was basically a bye week for them, so they're actually well rested. Carson Wentz, despite that win, he still looked like trash in his win over San Francisco. That was more Nick Mullins turning the ball over 3 times, giving Philly good field position. I don't think the Steelers will do that against the Eagles. These teams actually ranked number 1 and number 2 in sacks. Eagles number 1, Steelers number 2. They've played one fewer game though. But Pittsburgh does a better job protecting their quarterback. And defensively, again, we've talked about how great Pittsburgh's defense is. They allow just 2.7 yards per carry. Philly's really not going to be able to run the ball in that game. And they're going up. The Steelers also second in yards allowed per play total and third in yards per play differential. They're just great from both sides of the ball. You got to take Pittsburgh. Even if what is it, 7 points? I love that. I think Philly's not really good this year, and that they're not going to have a good. They're going to have a difficult time protecting Wentz against that Steelers pass rush.
I mean, that's the thing is you don't know who's going to suit up week to week on this Philadelphia offense, both in terms of pass catchers and also now with the offensive line has been dinged up. The Jason Peters injury obviously hurts. Lane Johnson was in and out of that game on Sunday. And really there's just no rhythm whatsoever to that Philadelphia offense. I mean, Wentz, I don't think even with he's been struggling even when he's had a semi-healthy cast out there. And then you just you throw all the injuries in, it compounds the issue. really the only time it seems like they've been moving the football is when Wentz takes off and runs and gets about 8-9 yards. And the last 2 weeks he's run for 102 yards and 10 first downs and 2 touchdowns. And it just seems to me that's a tough way to live offensively, especially going up against the Steelers defense. Andre, you mentioned their ability to get after the quarterback. They've also allowed just 32 rushing yards to quarterbacks this year, 4th fewest in the NFL. That's despite facing Daniel Jones, Jeff Driscoll, and Deshaun Watson, 3 guys who, for all their strengths and weaknesses, can run the ball. So I think Wentz is going to have a hard time if he gets outside the pocket of picking up those chunk gains like he got against San Francisco. You mentioned Nick Mullins sort of just doing everything he can to give that game away. Steelers much healthier, like you said. So it's hard for me to envision anything other than a Steelers blowout.
Yeah, make it a sweep. If this wasn't one of our games this week, I mean, this probably would be my lock of the week if I could beat one of you two to it. This just feels like a smoke show. Like Philly, I wonder if they can withstand the Pittsburgh pressure. Steelers, I got it right here. Let's see. They lead the NFL in pressure rate, hurry rate. They're second in QB knockdown, second in sacks, as Andre mentioned, despite not playing last week. And they blitz more than any other team in the league. Carson Wentz versus the blitz, 62 passer rating, just 6 yards per attempt, 4 sacks, no touchdowns, 2 picks. Against, he's even worse under pressure, just generally speaking. He's got a 28 passer rating under pressure, 4.5 yards per attempt. When he was pressured last week against San Francisco, he did complete 8 of 13 passes, but just for 63 yards, threw a pick, had a 41.5 passer rating. And I think on the other side of the football, you look at Juju Smith-Schuster, could be a huge game for him. 82% of his snaps have come from the slot this year. He's been targeted 14 times on those 82% of the snaps. 13 catches, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns. You look at the Eagles against slot receivers this year, 42 targets, 33 receptions on those 42 targets, 342 yards and a touchdown. I think it's a huge game for Juju. And like I said, it just is going to be it should be a tough afternoon for Philly to get anything going offensively. Also to the Juju thing and just the Pittsburgh offense in general, Philly lost linebacker TJ Edwards and safety Rudy Ford in that game. It sounds like they'll at least miss this week. So banged up and just not very good, I don't think that Philly team is. So I think this is a route for the Steelers. It should
Carson Wentz is 33rd in the league in passer rating. There's only 32 starting quarterbacks.
Yeah. That's not great.
And my thing is, I'm not sure how good Philly was to begin with.
I agree.
So then when you just start adding all of these ingredients, it's a recipe for disaster, as they say.
Yeah, I picked San Francisco last week. I don't feel bad about it other than the fact that I clearly did not put enough stock into how bad Nick Mullins probably is compared to replacement level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, anything else on that one, guys?
No.
It'll look cool. That'll be an aesthetically pleasing game. I like the Eagles, Steelers. Sounds like the Steelers will have 7,500 fans or something, so it'll feel kind of normal. Oh, quick detour. Is this feeling any less weird for you guys? Do you have the same juice when you sit down to watch football on Sundays as you have in years past?
I'll say for football, yeah, it feels kind of normal. But watching a Yankees playoff game in daylight yesterday was kind of strange in San Diego.
No fans, yeah. Everything. Yeah. I just think everything feels weird. It's so much better than not having it. Like, is the second I start to complain about any of this, please remind me of like May. You know what I mean? But it's just, as a big Packers fan, it was weird. I didn't feel myself heavily invested in Monday night's game when you're playing at Lambeau in front of absolutely nobody. It's
I think that might have had to do with the actual game itself.
That too, yeah.
But I think that this past week was the first time I felt like that. Like, I think for the first 3 weeks, I was juiced up about every game or whatever, and then I don't know if it was just the postponed game and then the uncertainty of the Patriots cheat. Like, those were 2 really good games that were, one being taken away and the other you're getting a diminished product. So that kind of just cast this cloud of just like, this is just a watered down slate now.
I tweeted about that. Like, those are the 2 best games of the weekend. We lost.
Yeah, so I think that maybe that just killed my enthusiasm. But
I will say it's not going to get a whole lot better this week either. 12 of this week's 15 games have a touchdown of a spread or more. Like, it is. There could be some blowouts this week. One of the games
the games that were on, I'm like, I never really found myself invested in many of them.
No, it was a bit of a slog, but like I said, better than nothing. So, one of the games that does not have a big spread this week is, I think it says a late Sunday afternoon game. Indianapolis, which is a team that's looked really good since their week 1 loss to Jacksonville, goes on the road to take on a Browns team that, dare I say, is quietly 3-1. Coming off of a really impressive, if you want to call it that, I guess, win in Dallas that maybe said more about the Cowboys than it did about the Browns. But the Colts go on the road, laying 2.5 here. Ricky, who do you like?
So I mean, we talked a lot about the Colts defense last week, and really they did nothing to dispel it. Hey, God bless you.
Bless you.
To really change my opinion either, one way or the other. Like, I still think that they're among the top defenses, maybe the best defense in football right now. But I still, you still have to factor in the level of competition. And really, they've had the easiest schedule in terms of playing teams with offensive limitations so far. You get the Jaguars, Vikings, Jets, Bears. So, like, I think that last week's game was, equally an indictment on the Bears offense. And I'm starting to question the Colts offense a little bit. So I think that this is a week where you're gonna learn some things about both of these teams. The one thing that I'm looking at that sort of just scares the daylights out of me is Indianapolis's injuries coming out of that Chicago game. Like, if Darius Leonard can't play in the middle of that defense, if Anthony Costanza can't anchor that offensive line, and you're going up against a Cleveland team that runs the football better than any team in the NFL and also has arguably the best pass rusher in the NFL in Myles Garrett, like, those are 2 huge injuries to factor into this. So it's tough without knowing their availability for Sunday to make this pick. But right now I'm leaning towards taking the points. I just, even with that Nick Chubb injury in Cleveland, I think that what they've done offensively is going to be something different that Indianapolis hasn't seen yet. So I could see some success on the ground for Cleveland. And if you're going to give me the points, I'm going to take him in this instance.
I was going to say, in fairness, we should note that Chubb won't play this weekend, but Kareem Hunt looked just as good after Chubb went down in Dallas. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do more with Dallas's defense than anything
probably.
else. So I'm going to take the Colts. They allow just 3.6 yards per carry. I get the competition for the Colts hasn't been that great, but their defense, this isn't just a fluky thing. Their defense has been trending in the right direction in the last 2 years after they hired Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator, who was actually Dallas for like 6 years, from 2011 to 2017 as their linebackers coach. Dallas instead refused to promote him or to defensive coordinator. Their defense still stinks. Meanwhile, Indianapolis in 2017 they're 30th in total defense. This year they're obviously first. So that's more of a Indianapolis knowing what they're doing with personnel and coaching on defense. And I think they're going to be able to limit the Browns, who love to run the ball. We know that. They'll be able to limit them. And once the Browns' running attack is limited, they're going to have to rely more on Baker Mayfield. And in his career, when Mayfield throws the ball 40 times or more in the game, the Browns are 1-7. Also, the Colts, special teams-wise, they've been fantastic all year. Number 1 in average drive start, number 2 in opponent's average drive start, dominate the field position game. And one more note. I think they lead the league in interceptions, right? Am I making that up?
The Browns have the best turnover differential in the
Browns have the best turnover differential, but the Colts lead the league in interceptions.
Well, when you get to face Gardner Minshew, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, and Nick Foles.
Baker Mayfield throws interceptions as well.
I understand. I'm just saying.
A lot of interceptions.
I gotta reevaluate some things, I think, because I am simpatico with Ricky this week, and that does not bode well for my performance, given how Ricky has performed lately. Perhaps I will try to lift him up, because I am also with Cleveland here. If injuries weren't an issue, I would definitely be on the Colts, because I think the Colts do a lot of things up front, especially, that could give Cleveland some issues. But yeah, if you're not going to be without Darius Leonard, they're already down a pair of linebackers as well. Maybe that run defense becomes a bit of an issue for the Colts. And, coming into the season, there were a lot of question marks about the Colts secondary. That was the clear weakness of their team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And again, to the schedule thing, who among those teams is not, is really going to test Indy's secondary, like, Beckham, Landry, even why can't I think
It
of?
could be an Austin Hooper game.
Yeah, it could be an Austin
dealing
Hooper
with those
game.
injuries in the middle of the defense.
Even
I don't
Kareem
know.
Hunt,
Uh,
like.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, it's just I think the injuries. It's a bad spot for Indy. I think here it's their toughest game of the season. They are injured. They're banged up. I think I gotta imagine Cleveland's feeling pretty good about itself. A lot of that just kind of leads me. I'm getting points for a team at home here. I think the Browns. This is a good spot for the Browns. So, what were you gonna say, Andre?
I was just gonna say that I think that blowout win against Minnesota. I know you guys are down on Minnesota. I still think Minnesota has a lot of good talent. They were able to hold Dalvin Cook to just 63 yards in that game. I think that's a testament of their.
Yeah, it was a fine win. And honestly, too, you could probably raise some questions about Cleveland's wins so far this year. Who have they beat? Washington, Cincinnati, and Dallas. I mean, going on the road to Dallas sounds good, but how good is that? I don't know.
Their one tough game against Baltimore, they lost 38-6.
I think this game, the more I think about it, Colts Browns. I've talked myself into this being a worthwhile Sunday afternoon hang session.
So. I like that.
Let's do locks and upsets, guys. Ricky, why don't you start us off with your lock?
My lock, I'll go against the team that Andre seems to be fairly high on in the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to take the Seahawks over the Vikings, 7-point favorites in Seattle. We obviously know what Seattle's offense is capable of, what they've been doing with that passing attack. The weakness of the Vikings among their many on the defensive side has mostly been that secondary. So this could be another huge week for Russell Wilson. So I will take Seattle at home. I
actually agree with that pick this week. I don't think Minnesota has.
So next week's their big.
Well, I just think Minnesota has a good running attack. So if you're going up against a team with a poor rush defense, I'm going to take Minnesota. But Seattle is good all around. I'm going to take Baltimore over Cincinnati. What is it, 13.5-point spread? But Baltimore has shown that they can blow out bad teams. They did it last week. They did it last year. And Joe Burrow, I like him. He's shown good strides, but he's still a rookie. He's been sacked 15 times this year. That offensive line isn't doing him any favors. I think Baltimore, they can get after the quarterback pretty well. And Baltimore runs the ball well. We all know that. They're second in yards per carry. Cincinnati, poor rush defense, 7th worst yards allowed per carry.
I had a tough week last week because I really put all my eggs into Jacksonville's basket against Cincinnati. So be careful against that Bengals team is all I will say. For my lock, I will take the Chiefs, I guess. 12.5-point favorites against Vegas. Weird 1 o'clock kick for this game. But, so the thing with the Chiefs is, like, a lot of people made a big deal out of what the Patriots were going through this week, and that's very legitimate. Like, they lost their former MVP starting quarterback, weren't sure when or if they were going to travel to Kansas City, and had to fly out the morning of the game. So there was a lot going against them, but that had to have been a weird situation for Kansas City as well. And it looked disjointed. A lot of that is credit to the Patriots, but it just didn't look right. And I think people will be down on Kansas City a little bit coming into this one. I think it's a perfect bounce back scenario, which is kind of funny for a team that won by 20 or whatever it was anyway. But I think this has a going away blowout written all over it. Vegas, no pressure on the quarterback, 30th in pressure rate. I think they're allowing the 3rd most yards after catch. Could be a big Clyde Edwards-Helaire game if you were to ask Steve Levy, excuse me. Could be a nice Travis Kelce spot as well. So I like the Chiefs to roll over the Raiders here.
Yeah, Vegas allows the 2nd most receiving yards to running backs too. So
there you go.
I like Clyde in that game as well.
Andre,
that game did not feel right, to your point.
No, yeah.
It's like, for obvious reasons, I guess, but like I thought maybe that would go away a little bit when you got into the game flow, but there was no game flow really. It was just you were just constantly sort of waiting for Kansas City to pull away at some point, and the Patriots obviously gave them every opportunity to do that. So it was, I don't know. It was just like, this was one of those weeks where you thought maybe you'd learn a little bit about both of those teams, or especially the Patriots, and then it's just
like
whatever.
It felt like a lot of going through the motions.
It was a formality more than anything.
Yeah. Andre, who's your upset?
Upset. I'm going with Carolina over Atlanta. don't even know how they're underdogs in this game. Atlanta is trash right now. Carolina, they're just a really good middle-of-the-pack team coming off 2 really good wins against up-and-coming teams, Arizona and the Chargers. And that's because of their offense. They haven't missed a beat after Christian McCaffrey went down. Mike Davis, he's actually averaging more yards per carry than McCaffrey. Great pass-catching running back. And what else? Atlanta, they allow the 3rd most passing yards to running back, so I could see another big Mike Davis game in here. They're also banged up a little. It looks like Julio Jones was a little injured in that Monday night game. So, yeah, I'll take Carolina in this one.
I like that pick. To just add on to your pick, underdog opponents 33-18 against the spread against the Falcons under Dan Quinn. So if you don't want to take the Falcons, really don't take them when they're laying points. So yeah. I agree with you there. But since you stole that pick, I'll take the Dolphins, 8.5-point underdogs against the 49ers. I right now not knowing who's going to be playing quarterback for San Francisco, kind of hope it's Nick Mullins after that train wreck of a performance on Sunday night. Could be C.J. Beathard, who maybe Garoppolo ends up coming back. I don't know. With that uncertainty, I think I'll take the Dolphins in the spot. It's just a kind of a scrappy team. I mean, we saw it this past week with Seattle that, the Dolphins, you're going to look and their numbers aren't going to be great at the end of the day. I mean, I still have concerns about that, the secondary and just really them defensively in general. But San Francisco, just such a wild card week to week with all their injuries. Feel very similar to Philadelphia with the injury situation. So it's kind of ironic that they were playing each other this past week. But
does it surprise you guys that they're going with Fitzpatrick again this week?
No. That's a tough spot. It would be a real tough one to. When is their bye? Do you know? Do you have their schedule up any chance?
No.
But to put Tua in against San Francisco, you know what I mean?
No, that's true.
That's a tough ask.
They get Denver. Their bye is in week 11. But
so they'll make it
Denver the week after.
Maybe that's the spot, right?
I think they should have done it in week 3 against Jacksonville, but they ended up winning that game. So
yeah.
What do I know?
That would have been a Thursday night. That's a tough spot too. I don't know. There's no rush with a guy who's got an injury history like Tua does. You know what I mean?
It's true.
Yeah, I don't really see the reasoning for it. I just think that I think they can bide their time a little bit.
Their season's not over either. You know what I mean? If they can hang around 500, like maybe the Patriots aren't very good. Maybe sneak in, get a wild card. The playoff field's expanded. I don't know.
That's the thing. I don't think the Dolphins are at a point where they do I think they're going to go anywhere? No, but I also don't feel like a lot of they don't feel like a lost cause. I think they could make some strides outside of the quarterback position at some point this year. So I don't know. Maybe they'll just get to a point of desperation, but I don't think they're there yet.
Maybe it gets maybe 11 if they're out of it by the bye then.
Or maybe they do make the change and that helps my cause because Tua comes in and helps pull off the upset.
Yeah, right. Then they get better and they make the playoffs under Tua. Who knows? All right. Speaking of teams that are actually bad, the New York Jets. I've got them as my upset this week. Getting 6.5 at home against Arizona. Don't love it because I'm taking the Jets and I never learn. But New York 0-4 against the spread. So basically, I have right in here my notes. Something's got to give, right? Or maybe they're just that bad. I don't know. If they do anything halfway decent, it's pressure the quarterback. I think they're it's top 10, in terms of the pressure numbers. Kyler Murray, against no pressure, 106 pass rating. Against pressure, 22.6 passer rating. Wow. They are also, and he wasn't very good against it last year either. I mean, most quarterbacks, obviously aren't as good against pressure, but that's a pretty big drop. They're also in the middle of game of a 3-game quote unquote road trip, if you want to call it that. It just seems like a lot of travel. Maybe it's just a spot for the Jets to pick off a team here this week. So I'll take the Jets, I guess, against Arizona because I am not as high on the Cardinals as, say, Andre. So I don't know. Don't love it. Not a great week for picking upsets, that's for sure.
No. Speaking of the Jets game, what a classic Thursday night showdown last week.
Holy moly.
Oh, that game was exciting, though.
The game was better than I expected. Yeah.
I know. It was what was it, 60-something points scored?
Yeah.
For teams that couldn't get out of their own way for the first few weeks.
I do every week I do a Thursday night post or whatever. So go to games.nesson.com to sign up for You get like a super prop contest, and we do one for every Thursday night game, and I do a post for it and make my own picks basically. And I was on just about every under in that game.
It's hard not to be,
dead by by halftime. So, speaking of that, for more of our picks, go to nesson.com/thespread. We'll have all of our picks throughout the week. We do, primetime game picks. We do favorites to avoid, underdogs to bet on, a lot of betting stuff throughout the week. And then we just do our full week 5 NFL picks that come out on Thursday. You can find those again at nesson.com/spread. If you're watching on YouTube, head on over to iTunes, Spotify, throw us a subscription, subscribe, rate, review, do all of that. Again, say nice things about us. It'll make us feel better. Even if you disagree with the picks, it's nothing personal, We're just here to entertain. So.
No. And maybe, some of us who aren't having a strong season and you disagree with the picks, maybe it just validates your own picks. So
right.
We're just providing information for you.
Yep.
We've had Eagles fans attack us many times before, and we all picked the Steelers over the Eagles. So.
Oh, it's going to be, the YouTube comments are going to be a cesspool.
It's an Eagles week. So
yeah.
Those are always the most interesting.
Fun.
We had to get our shots in. What did we bash? Florida last week? Now we're on to Philadelphia. Just creating enemies one city at a time, 1 week at a time.
Nothing good happens in Philadelphia, to quote a very powerful man. So, and with that, I think it's time to get out of here. That's Andre, Ricky. I'm Mike. This is The Spread. Be back again next week. See you then. Goodbye.